Welcome to our roundup of day one of the only test of the Women's Ashes. It was a roller coaster of a day. Started off looking like England were going to run away with it, but Australia rescued themselves from an abysmal 4 for 2 to close the day out, 327 for 7 from 97 overs. Yeah, Meg Lanning scored 93 and Rachel Haynes 86, and between them they put on 169 before they fell in the space of 4 balls after tea. It did look like Australia were rebuilding when Elise Perry came to the crease, but she was out for 18 and Australia were forced to recover. It wasn't England's best display of fielding, dropping Lanning on 14 and Haynes on 44. So at the close of play, it looks like day one, Australia ended up on top. Joining me today, I have Mahika and Alex to digest day one and look ahead to the next 3 days of the Women's Ashes Test match. Alex, what were your initial thoughts when things looked like they were going nice and rosily at 4 for 2?
I mean, if you're the opposition and you put Australia into bat and you get them 4 for 2, you got to say you're pretty good at what you're doing. But, they it was a game of two halves, the first day particularly. Like England started well, they had momentum, they got Elise Perry out quite cheaply as well. I mean, if you look at Alyssa Healy, she's already got 2 ducks this series. So, she gets one in the second innings. She's going to be quacking away. But, it's just such a shame because Catherine Brunt has bowled her heart out. She's bowled so well. She deserves more. And to be honest, Australia don't deserve to be 327 for 7, but we've seen in the men's game that when you drop catches, what happens? The opposition will stamp on you. And it seems that dropping catches and having poor fielding displays are spread from the men's team to the women's. But it was really nice to see Charlie Dean make her debut, actually get to bowl a little bit and, sort of continue on that momentum she's been building since making her debut last summer against New Zealand. So, some things are good. There are definitely things to work on. I'm quite surprised Maddie Villiers didn't get picked to play because she is one of England's gun fielders, and Danni Wyatt didn't get to play either, considering she scored 70 odd in the first T20, so she was in form. But we're not the selectors, we're not Lisa Keightley. We don't know why they make these decisions, but for Heather Knight to drop Lanning, that's cost England greatly. So
I thought that at the time. I was wondering, it was very much one of those moments you're just falling into your sleepy stupor and you're thinking, is that going to be a game changer? And I was hoping that when I woke up again, I wouldn't have been right in my guesstimations. But, for someone that's right as often as I am, it just comes naturally. And yeah, so that I think was a very costly moment for England. We were riding high when Catherine Brunt came absolutely flying out of the traps at the beginning. It's one of those things. She's been around for a long time. She burst onto the test scene aged 19. She doesn't seem to have aged. She puts in just as much every time. And she is just England women's cricket personified. But we have also had a few questions come in from listeners. So we've got one here and it says, do Australia continue batting tomorrow to make it so they can't really lose? Or do they declare so that the positive result remains in play? This is quite an interesting question because obviously there are 4 points on offer from a test match. Australia currently leading the series 4-2 after those 2 rained out games. What do you think, Alex? Do they continue batting tomorrow and make it so they can't lose, or do they declare?
I always think it's risky batting on longer than you should, considering as well women's test matches are only 4 days. So you want to maximise as much time as you can trying to bowl the opposition out. So England only mathematically and as we all know, they only need to get 3 wickets to then be batting. It just depends on if, they're able to get those wickets quite quickly. And it also depends what kind of form some of the players have been in, because they were saying on commentary, Australia haven't really prepared for the red ball stuff, whereas England's preparations were for the red ball. And then obviously the schedule got changed and the T20s were brought forward. So they were saying that England, in fact, were less prepared for the T20s than they were for the test. But it just brings in to question why women don't play more test matches. And before, when was it restructured? 2013. The only way they determined the Ashes was with test matches. Like the first ever series of the women's Ashes was 3 tests. So maybe they need to, although it's a multi-format series, maybe they should have 2 tests instead of 1. And in that way, you get 3 T20s, 3 ODIs, and 2 tests to make it a bit fairer. But who knows?
It's a difficult subject as well, because you can very much play the game of if, then, so maybe if there were 5 days, or if we played more test matches, then we would do better, and then this would happen. I think the 4-day test match very much comes into it in this point. It would definitely not be in the Australian spirit to play out for a draw. Australia as a nation, we know they always want to beat the English. We want to beat the Australians. That's just, it's in our blood. We can't help it. So I can't see them going out with the intentions of just drawing. With the 4-day test match, that is interesting as well, because there was a point yesterday when it looked like the over rate just was not moving. It was like someone had just turned the scoreboard off, because England were going along very slowly, but we did get 97 overs in the day of the scheduled 100, I think it was. So actually, they sped up a bit by the end. I don't know if that's because there were less wickets falling, but that's another question for another day. But yeah, this is one of those moments we can have a lot of people thinking, is this where we call for a 5-day test match where we get the result either way, rather than just plays out, run out of time, it's a draw. So our second question comes in and it says, how, as fans, can the public increase the pressure on the cricket boards to schedule more women's test matches?
That is a tough one, because even though there are test playing nations like New Zealand, Pakistan, and New Zealand haven't played a test match for some while. Like, I think there was someone who tweeted when New Zealand were over last summer that Sophie Devine has never played a test match for her country, which you think someone of her quality and her status never played a test match is wild. And then you look at the comparison of test matches between men's and women's. Like, you look at Heather Knight, she's been playing probably around the same time as Joe Root, and he has got significantly more test matches. So why isn't women's test matches, why aren't they being attracted to the women's cricket audience? It's one of those things that especially now with what's gone on behind closed doors with the ECB and their issues with diversity, racism, making the game more inclusive, I think you have to do that, but you also have to make it fairer for every nation so that they're all on the same level playing field. Because
also think on this point is that because there aren't as many test playing nations, you don't just want to have test matches because then we can say we've had test matches, because if you put them on and they're poor quality and they're not well contested, then someone somewhere is going to turn around and say, this is why we didn't do it. So you've got to do them at the right time. At the moment, we're building up the short format so well around the world. There's so many more associate nations coming in. There are people that are becoming more in the zeitgeist in the women's cricket world. So maybe I can, as much as I would love to see more test matches, maybe that's because I come from an English point of view when I think we have that strength and depth and we've got that established format. Whereas in other countries where they're still establishing themselves as these sides to compete at the top level, maybe we need to focus on the short game there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I think also from hearing what some of our former podcast guests have said, there's no system in place in some of these countries. Like you look at Zimbabwe, they were a test playing nation. I'm not sure if they are now because of the whole ICC revoked their membership status, whatever. But they don't have like a county system or a regional system in place. So maybe that is part of the problem as to why some of these countries can't or aren't able to play tests, because there's nothing at grassroots level to prepare their female players for test match cricket. So I think that is definitely part of the problem. But then there's also the case that if you put pressure on these governing bodies and you go against what they say, there is the potential that you could get banned. So it's sort of a catch-22 situation where you say, do I fight for this, or am I going to get banned and never play cricket again?
I feel like we could open a whole can of worms here. So looking ahead to day 2, Australia will be restarting the day 327 for 7. They lost wickets late in the day, which is good for the momentum for England going into day 2. What would, obviously the dream start would be 3 and 3, but what do you think realistically England would be hoping for to aim for as they come into bat?
I think if they can bowl Australia out for less than 350, that's a good score. I think, though, they really just want to get those 3 wickets as quickly as possible. And I like the fact that, the commentators were bigging up Talia McGrath, and then she got out last ball of the day. That's what we love to call a commentator's curse. So hopefully, when England are batting, though, that doesn't happen. God forbid. That I really hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, bowling them out for less than 350, considering the start that they had, would be about even, I'd say.
Interesting. And I just want to finish off as well with huge kudos to Amy Jones behind the stumps.
Yeah, 5 catches. Like, we always big this up in the men's game, but Amy Jones is such a quality keeper that, like, she makes even the most simple things look ridiculous.
She's got to that level when we expect her to take the sublime every time, and actually we're surprised and disappointed when she doesn't. Whereas it should be that we're celebrating those, but actually we're like, it's Amy Jones, she's going to take them. And if she doesn't, we're like, sorry, what? So I think that's a good level to be at. If people are always expecting great things of you, it's a sign of what you've done up to that point.
Yeah. She'll probably be hoping that when it comes time to bat, she gets a few more runs, because she didn't get many in the first T20, and we don't know whether she would have got more or not in the second or third, because they were obviously rained out. So here's hoping her form from the beginning of last season comes into effect when it comes her to bat.
Very much so. And we'll also be hoping that Weather Night can do her thing and stop it from raining, because I don't know where it's come from, but Australia has decided to be England now, and we've had 2 rain-out games, and I would really quite like to see this one go the distance.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe if it had rained more when the men's series was on, we might have actually had done a little better.
I think that's a topic for another day. But yes, so we go into day 2. Kicks off again tonight, so get your caffeine at the ready, and we will try and drop in again tomorrow to digest day 2's play. Anyone willing to join us, let us know, send in your questions, and we will try and answer them. We're going to give our, what we like to say is expert opinion. I think we know quite a bit about the women's game between us. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, and we will speak to you again tomorrow, when hopefully England are riding a little higher than they were at the close of play today.
Yeah. Who's hoping we get a night century?
Oh, we love a night century. That would be beautiful.